As if Alan Wake 2 wasn't already a masterpiece, the Lake House DLC only builds upon and recontextualizes this foundation in a very congruent, seamless way. What began as the conclusion to a story that was already laden with symbolism, complex themes, and a deep sense of mystery was somehow able to add another layer to the cake, turning the lens towards itself once more, but this time widening the aperture to not just writing, but the nature of art in general. In the Lake House, we explore several attempts by the FBC to study and manufacture art. Dr. and Dr. Marmont put their exquisite scientific attention to detail to the test to try and uncover the secrets of Cauldron Lake and how to control its power to manifest art as reality. While Jules was laser focused on manipulating the painter Rudolf Lane, Diana scrambled from study to study, attempting to emulate Alan's manuscript pages that have appeared from within the lake. The DLC expands upon the powers of the lake and what art stimulates it. Apparently, the art must be genuine, authentic, and the creator must put some of themselves into their work. The art needs to be emotive. Not just anything that is created can alter reality using the power of the lake. There seems to be some kind of fundamental integrity to a piece of art in order for this manipulation to occur. But what does that even mean? Disclaimer: art is, of course, subjective, so nothing I say in this video is a statement of fact, but rather my interpretation, and I'll do my best to delineate between my own ramblings and the points I think Remedy are trying to make. So let's dive into this topic as I summarize my understanding of the narrative events and spiral off into several tangents about the nature of art itself. The FBC had increasing interest since they received word of the AWE that took place in 2010, which are the events of the first game. In 2015, the Lake House Research Facility was founded. Things around the lake were mostly quiet for nearly a decade. In 2019, the oldest house goes into lockdown due to the Hiss invasion, and the staff of the Lake House is left to their own devices on how to move forwards with the research. During this period of time, pages of a manuscript written by Alan Wake begin appearing all over the greater Bright Falls region. These detail events that begin unfolding, and they recount personal thoughts and actions of the Marmonts that he couldn't have possibly known. This drives the head researchers into an obsession with opening a stable portal to the dark place through the Cauldron Lake threshold. 2 projects were initiated. Project Artemis, led by Diana Marmont, focused on recreating Alan's manuscripts, and Project Romnus, led by Jules Marmont, focused on the creation of art in general, both with the explicit goal of maintaining a stable threshold to the dark place. Diana first attempts to use a system of machines dubbed ADTs, short for Automatic Typing Device, to recreate Alan's writing style, meticulously poring over the real manuscript pages to distill an almost comical set of criteria that define Alan's work. And the level of detail is immense, including the maximum number of words in a sentence, the types of words used, even attempting to obtain the same model of typewriter as well as the same ink that Alan used. And damn, discovering the room with multitudes of typewriters ceaselessly clacking away in the darkness was so unnerving, even before the combat sequence begins. In what might be the most on-the-nose messaging that we have seen from Remedy to date, Diana is clearly exemplifying the lack of understanding that those who build large language models usually have when it comes to art. Most people I have spoken to, artists and non-artists, have come to an agreement that AI art sucks, or at least that passing off AI art as a creative endeavor is cringe. Using AI as a tool is not what I'm talking about here. I can think of a few reasons as to why this is. 1, there is no emotion behind the creation of the art. 2, It is derived from the creations of other people without their consent. Third, it's usually pretty ugly, in my opinion. And fourth, it comes with an avoidable environmental cost. By nature, LLMs cannot generate anything new. They scrape data that's obtained through the clear web, and the act of generating an image or song uses another person's work to derive the result. To attempt to pass off the end product of this process as original art is laughable. The fact that there are some absolute gonks out there who think of themselves as artists because they're an AI prompter is one of the funnier things to have come out of the 21st century. They may argue that they're doing the same things that artists have always done, deriving their work by studying the work of others, which I would disagree with. But it does raise some interesting questions, and we'll get to that. The biggest problem with AI generated, and the point that I believe that Remedy is making in the DLC at least, is that its creation is not an emotive process. It does not come from a place of passion. There's no spark of inspiration that ignites a fire within its creator. Even if the prompts are expertly crafted, if they are a perfect distillation of the parameters that define what a work of art is to be, the actual creation is done through calculations and pattern recognition by software that was fed instructions. When talking about real life, I don't necessarily believe that there's something spiritual or esoteric about creating art, but rather there is something that can only come about when something is created with emotion. At least for now, nearly everyone, including people who study and create LLMs, do not believe that the generative AIs of today feel emotion. When we inevitably do reach a point where AI can truly be a thinking, creative intelligence, all of this goes out the window. But then again, how will we ever know if it ever reached that point? How do I know that you aren't all bots? Statistically, probably half of you are bots. How do we know that other people on the street aren't bots? And how do I know that I'm not just reacting and rationalizing my instinctive actions after the fact as an evolutionarily beneficial coping mechanism? You know, like a bot. But, anyways, this is going into a whole other topic. Let's all take 6 deep breaths and focus on what AI, or LLMs specifically, are today. More succinctly put, LLMs are, by nature, entirely derivative and almost certainly don't feel and act on emotions. And in the world of Alan Wake, this does not sufficiently stimulate the lake into changing reality. Even if the AI prompter, with burning passion, expertly creates a series of instructions that they really believe will create something of art, the actual creation is still done by a machine who unfeelingly steals bits and pieces of other people's work. Okay, editing phantom here. So, since recording this part of the video, through my research, as I am doing because this is generally a interesting topic for me, these LLMs that generate images, specifically if they use a diffusion model, I believe is the terminology, they're not making a collage of these things that they are seeing on the internet. So maybe it is inaccurate to say that they're directly stealing bits and pieces. Like I just said, it's more like they are being trained on these images and create the model of what this image should look like, and that gets tagged. And so when a prompter inputs a word that correlates to this tag, it references the model and generates the image that way. So, not exactly stealing, and spoilers for the next section of the video, it's not stealing in the way I'm about to discuss either, but we should be as accurate as possible, even when we're talking about things that we don't necessarily like. Anyways, back to the video. But this is not a trait of LLMs alone, for as we're about to discuss, just because something is made by a person doesn't mean it will automatically be authentic or emotional. So naturally, Diana's efforts with the ATDs are fruitless. Having lost oversight from the oldest house for some time now, she opens her trusty How to Be a Shady Government Organization manual and kidnaps Ed Booker, a playwright whom we meet in the base game. The astute players will have discovered that he went missing, and well, this is where he wound up. Diana gives him the same criteria that she formulated from before, testing to see if a human emulating Alan's writing would do the trick. She is wholly focused on Alan and his work to a fault. She clearly cannot see and doesn't value the artistic merits of anyone else, or any other medium for that matter. Ed does not realize the gravity of his situation. He believes he is in some kind of writing workshop set up by his wife. Diana has clued into something important, that in order to make something that stimulates the lake, a human must be behind the pen. Ed, by his own words, is enjoying the experience. He finds writing within this criteria refreshing. He has spent an unknown amount of time, probably just days, trapped in a concrete cell, trying his hardest to copy Alan's writing style, for he thinks that this might give him the success that he craves when his writer's workshop is finally over. Diana hates everything that he writes. His work is not producing the results that she needs and considers torturing him to elicit stronger emotions. Diana is close, but she's missed the mark yet again. Let's look at why Ed's writer's workshop failed. After all, taking someone else's techniques is just a normal thing for an artist to do, right? Isn't this just like what an AI is doing? What is Remedy intending to convey through this narrative? Pablo Picasso, amongst a multitude of other famous people, is credited with saying, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." This quote has been interpreted in many ways. Just Google it yourself and see how varied the opinions can be. A cynical take on that would be Picasso is saying that great artists steal the work of others and write their name on it. On the surface, this might ring true, and maybe that is what Picasso, or whoever originally said it, is intending, but that isn't the way that I or many others interpret the phrase. Naturally, art as a whole builds on itself. No ideas are truly original, and everyone has influences that color the creative process. Maybe this is cope, but indulge me for a minute. There are schools that teach creative endeavors who exclusively study the techniques and styles of successful people that came before them. So what's wrong with what Ed Booker is doing? Why isn't his writing working to open the threshold? Let's look at one of the most renowned film composers of all time, John Williams. It's no secret, in the composing community at least, that Williams has taken heavy inspiration from other composers. Check out the theme from Star Wars versus Eric Korngold's theme from the 1942 film King's Row. Or how about this desert sequence from Tatooine when compared to Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring? Or this cue when the rebels make their final attack on the Death Star versus Gustav Holst's Mars, Bringer of War, from his famous Planets suite. And there are more. Lots more. People noticed this early on, and accusations that Williams ripped off these melodies never really subsided. It's actually more of a joke now. In fact, Gustav Holst's The Planets is somewhat of a fake book for film composers, a fake book being a collection of chords, songs, and melodies that musicians would share, particularly in the blues and jazz communities. People love The Planets for its wide range of emotions, and film composers love being inspired by The Planets. I love The Planets and have been inspired by it. I have linked a performance in the description so that you can love it too. But John Williams was not trying to imitate these other composers. He isn't trying to be Holst or Stravinsky or Korngold, but he has taken these ideas and made them his own. All of his works have a deep emotional foundation that can be felt by the audience. It's a nuanced topic for sure, with lots of room for debate on where the line between pastiche and plagiarism should be. But the reality is that Williams has made all of these ideas his. He recontextualized them, he modified and built upon them, and infused them with enough of his own style that they have become something different. And the next composer who does the same to Williams' work is just the next link in the chain of artistic history. This is how I interpret Picasso's quote. By stealing something, you make it yours. It's yours now, and it becomes a part of your repertoire to rehash, modulate, and build upon, just as, when writing music, you would with any of the scales, chords, and rhythms that already exist. Using these tools, you can create your own work of art with your own emotional foundation to it. Maybe this really was said with cynicism, but I'll just steal this phrase and make it my own as well. Joke's on you, Picasso, you abusive misogynist piece of shit. To bring it closer to home, the gameplay of Alan Wake 2 is clearly building off of the gameplay mechanics that were set in place by early survival horror games such as Resident Evil and Silent Hill. However, it would simply be inaccurate to call it a ripoff of those games. Remedy has made it their own, or stolen the framework of the gameplay to be linguistically consistent, but iterated upon it and built it up in their own way so that now it's its own thing. It's just the artistic process. Did Lies of P rip off the Souls games, or did they take the framework that From Software invented and made it their own? Did Dark Souls rip off the interconnected, labyrinthian world of Metroid, or did they recontextualize it in their own way? Did Metroid rip off the open-ended exploration of the original Legend of Zelda? By now, you should get my point. This, however, is not what Ed Booker is doing. And it's not what Diana Marmont is instructing him to do. Ed is clearly trying to copy Alan's writing style in the hopes that by writing like Alan Wake, his own career will take off and he'll see the success that he's always wanted. In real life, this strategy can definitely bring success for some people, but their work is always going to be derivative, and without going through the crucible of incorporating these influences into their own creative process, eventually the well dries up and it's reflected in what they create. This also explains why things like the Kofskala Brothers commercials did not activate the threshold. These are manufactured commercials and not emotive artistic expression. I myself have struggled with this distinction, and there's a lot of music that I've written over the years that could have been true expression and maybe would have given me more success, but because I was so focused on following rules or sounding like another composer, my work was just kinda neutered and the emotional aspect was less present. In the world that Remedy has created, this is not sufficient to bring success to Diana's experiments. We have spent the entire video thus far talking about Diana Marmont and her failures to manufacture compelling art. Well, it's finally time to talk about Jules Marmont and Rudolf Lane. It was actually Diana who suggested that they begin experimenting on live subjects, and Jules was initially opposed to the idea. However, all that changed when Dr. Darling visited the research station. Darling laughed at the idea of calling the dark presence the Shadow, a name that Jules coined, and he took it personally, to say the least. I think the Shadow is a great name, even better than the dark presence, but that's just me. Luckily for Jules, he found a test subject that volunteered to be a part of Project Romnus. Rudolf Lane, as you may remember, is a painter and one of Dr. Emil Hartmann's patients from Alan Wake 1. It was determined by the FBC that Lane is a Class 2 para-utilitarian, and that his paintings have recorded past, present, and future events that were impossible for Rudolf to have known about conventionally. It was also noted that he did not appear like he could trigger the reality-altering properties of the lake. It did not appear like he could do that. But anyways, at first, things were okay. He was given the basic necessities, and Jules was amicable towards the subject. Nevertheless, the stress and pressure from the research staff began to take its toll. Painting no longer was an expression of himself, and he began to resent the art, describing it as only taking from me, and the resentment towards his overlords grew. Eventually, he declared that he would paint for them no more, and he wanted to leave. That's when Jules began introducing drugs into his food clandestinely. This improved Rudolph's compliance, and he resumed painting, but his art became formless and abstract. This was hardly useful for the research staff, and Rudolf, in his drug-induced stupor, feels no connection to the paintings. Jules' resentment towards his subject continued to swell. More drugs, less food. He knew the painting was inside of him. He would cut it out if he could, he records. Jules leaves something behind in the cell. A letter opener, now in the painter's hands. It wasn't long before Rudolf decided to end it all. Staring at the blood running down his arms, the painter felt a well of emotion and inspiration rise up within him. He would paint one more time. No brush, no paint, no canvas, just himself and a cement wall. One last gift to make them remember what they had done. Jules Marmont, fully realized as the monster that he is ecstatic. This was the moment he was waiting for. He lamented Rudolf for but a moment before instructing the staff to carve the painting out of the cell, and he began to prepare for the final experiment. This, as we know, is successful. A threshold to the dark place itself is opened, and the dark presence floods through the facility, killing or taking everyone inside. This brings us to what I believe Remedy is trying to convey and what this entire video is about. The lake doesn't react to art itself. It's the emotional fire behind the creation of the art that triggers the AWE. Art itself can be nearly anything, a building, a toddler's chaotic splattering of paint, or a medium-defining composition. But what separates art from content or random creation is the emotional resonance that a creator feels while they're making it. This is what separates Jackson Pollock from spilled paint, what separates an acclaimed documentary from a Mr. Beast video, and what separates corporate feel-good music from real good music. And if we're ever to get some kind of definition as to what makes something art, it's this. Art is created with emotion and passion. Anything created without those wouldn't really be art. Or at least it wouldn't be good art. I don't know. I don't even like that definition, but trying to define art seems as futile as trying to define evil. But I guess that didn't stop me before. None of the FBC's attempts to manufacture art led to a successful experiment until Rudolf was driven to give literally everything he had into one final painting, the only impassioned painting that he had made since his arrival at the lake house, and his last. It is possible that they were able to reproduce some results. However, this must have been outside their observation, as they have recorded no successes throughout their studies. We pretty much know that the lake affects the entire Earth, if not the universe, so their experiments may have caused some unseen changes in reality. A para-utilitarian musician, a moniker for the real-life musician Poe, was presumably able to escape her containment composing the song 6 Deep Breaths. She was able to change reality in a way that facilitated her disappearance and reemergence in our real world. Whether this had an impact on Kieran Estevez, who repeats this mantra several times during the DLC, or if it's just a common relaxation technique as it is in our reality, it's left ambiguous. However, I do suspect there's a connection, as there usually is in this universe. Rudolf Lane's paintings, before his arrival to the lake house, were said to predict future events as well as portray past and present events with details that he couldn't have possibly known about. It's completely possible that he was altering reality, and the FBC only sees the end result of this reality shift. Before he lost his passion and was subjugated by the chemical substances, he was painting in his traditional style, so it's also possible that the same thing happened beyond the FBC's purview. Now, when writing this video, I noticed something interesting, and I almost included it in the section about Ed Booker. But it seems like all of the people who were able to coax the lake into changing reality are para-utilitarians. The Andersons, Rudolf Lane, Poe, and Alan are all confirmed para-utilitarians, and Thomas Zane isn't confirmed by the FBC to be one, but like, come on, he likely is. Especially if Alan is a reincarnation of Tom, as I theorized in my last video. Saga is also a para-utilitarian. She isn't an artist, but this ability allows her to use the clicker, cementing Dark Ocean summoning into reality the composition of other para-utilitarians. So what does this mean for the lore? Does the lake only react to para-utilitarians? Are all artists para-utilitarians? Did Ed Booker's writing fail because he isn't a para-utilitarian? How many more times can I say para-utilitarian in this section before my tongue is twisted into a pretzel? Well, I think given the meta-narratives regarding art and creation found in both games of the series, it wouldn't be ridiculous at all if Remedy is saying that all artists are special and have potential paranatural abilities. This could easily extend to any human, as Jesse and Dylan Faden from Control. They're not artists or descendants of an entity such as Mr. Door, but they are para-utilitarians, and this could be the topic of a whole other video, but Jesse and Dylan didn't just manifest their powers on their own. Both of them made contact with paranatural entities, that being Hedron, the Board, and the Hiss. And it's the contact with these beings that made them so powerful, so who knows? I'm of the mind that anyone can become a para-utilitarian, but that artists have an inherent affinity towards manifesting these powers. So, coming back to Ed Booker, he failed to manifest these powers because of all the reasons that I explained in this video. But what do you think? I think that this could also explain why Alan can't just fix everything by writing something like, "And then Alan gained superpowers and saved everyone and made everything fine again," like all the memes joke about. Unless that sentence spontaneously arose from a place of pure artistic passion, it would just be a contrived, inauthentic work and it wouldn't change anything. He's convinced that 1, he's in a horror story, and 2, that the flow of the story has to make sense. But Mr. Door criticizes him, amused that Alan is putting these restrictions on himself. Perhaps he could have just written a happy story that overrides Return, but he misunderstands how the Dark Plate operates. It would have had to have been an emotionally charged, genuine act of artistic expression for it to work, and Alan is just going through his horror phase right now, so that's the genre he passionately writes in. And this is where I think we can separate the Dark Presence from the Dark Place. The Dark Place is formless and can be altered based on the will of the person experiencing it. The Dark Presence seems to just be a malevolent entity that originates from within this dimension. It wants to break free and subjugate the world using the power of the Dark Place. Well, what's the only emotion that you can force on others? Fear. You can show someone a magnificent painting and they may have a range of emotions, but you hold a gun to someone's head, and they will feel fear. The Dark Presence is a demon that can possess anyone who's emotionally vulnerable, and if they're an artist, use them to harness the lake for its own means. Fear just so happens to be the best method to both force an emotion on someone and elicit a strong emotional response, and so this is what the Dark Presence uses to exert its influence. I bring this up because in a lot of discussions regarding the nature of the Dark Place and the Dark Presence, I see people conflating the two as if the Dark Place itself craves a tortured artist, and I've fallen into this trap as well. But just as I outlined, I believe this is misguided. Which brings me to my final point. I want to revise a theory that I put forward in my last Alan Wake video, namely regarding Thomas Zane's poem that magically whisked him and Barbara away to a pocket dimension as they sang into the lake. Go watch the other video for a full recap on the theory and added context, or just go to thishouseofdreams.blogspot.com to read the source material if you're unfamiliar. But basically, I theorized that perhaps the poem in question was a part of Alan's story that was cemented into reality when he used the clicker in the first game, and that Alan had overwritten what really occurred on that day. Mostly because I didn't know how this uncharacteristically happy ending could just come out of nowhere. Well, after a long while of ruminating on the subject and gaining some new understanding, I'm not so sure. It could have very well played out exactly as this House of Dreams says it does. If Tom composed the final poem, his masterpiece, and poured everything he had into it, I see no reason why the dark place wouldn't make that a reality. As long as it was from his heart and imbued with emotion, it may very well happen just as we are told. I don't think it undermines my last video. I don't think it really changes the thesis at all, and it might even make the theory more coherent. So, feel free to watch that and enjoy the brooding, menacing voice that I don't do in my videos anymore. Art is ubiquitous, formless, and seemingly has no restrictions or necessary parameters, yet nearly everyone I have interacted with has some opinion on what should or shouldn't be considered art. For fuck's sake, a banana taped to a wall was considered art. It's frankly unhelpful as a descriptive term, but one thing that ties all art together is the emotional weight that the artist imbues into their work. Art is emotion. And I believe that's how the dark place operates. Something that is created methodically and without emotion just becomes regular old content to be consumed, while passionately made art can change reality. But what do you think? Thanks for watching. I would appreciate a like and a comment if you have anything you want to add to the discussion. Maybe I missed something. Let me know. And until next time, keep your head above the water as you traverse the grand spiral.